What's up, Big Red Hunter Nation? I hope we're having a good day today. There's just something I felt like I needed to explain more, so we're going to talk about duck calls for beginners, single reeds versus double reeds. I felt like in my last video I did a decent job of explaining single reeds versus double reeds, but I wanted to go kind of more in depth, and so I decided to make another video. A couple things that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about pressure. I don't feel like I fully explained in my last video what I meant by pressure and how it kind of affects duck calls, as well as I talked about range. I didn't feel like I explained range as well, so let's dive on in, guys. So, begin with pressure. Pressure basically means air. It's the amount of air that you have to blow into a call in order to make it work. And basically air and pressure are synonymous, and you'll hear that a lot between duck callers, pro duck callers. If you watch videos, like I talked about in my last video, I talked about pressure. So it is basically the amount of air that you need to put into a call to make it work. So if I don't put enough air, it doesn't make a noise. If I put too much air, it sounds really bad. So how that affects your duck call is the amount of air that you need to, make your call work with a quack, a feeder, and a hail call. Some calls take less air, some calls take more air. It depends on a couple of things. So, with that being said, you have one reed. This is the Ducklander Loud Timber, and the double reed, the Zinc PH2. So, pretty simple. You either have one reed, they're basically just a plastic reed that you would find in the tone board, and one reed basically is you have to vibrate one reed with the amount of air that you have coming through your lungs and your diaphragm into the call. And then you have the double reed, which takes two reeds vibrating in order to make the sound coming from your diaphragm. So a lot of times a single reed's a little bit easier to work and takes less pressure in order to make it work because you only have to vibrate one reed. In the double reed you have two. So sometimes it's a little bit easier in a single reed to make it work, but on the other hand, that's where we're kind of getting into the next step, is range. I don't think I really explained range as well as I should have the last time. So the amount of range of sound is you either got a deep, nice growl quack up until you get a high, squeaky squeal, trying to get duck's attention up here in your hail call. So you have a wide range. That's kind of what I mean, is you've got the amount of sound and the amount of the extreme kind of sound coming out here. So if we use this kind of diagram, we've got a range of sound from the bottom to the top. Now, single reed only takes that one reed to vibrate, which means you get the full range of sound, which you can go here to here, but also you can go out here, which is outside of the extremes, and you can make a really squealy or really growly quack that doesn't sound like a duck, and you don't want that. So on the double reeds, you tend to keep your range in here, so your range of sound doesn't fluctuate as much, and that sometimes people like to have the more extreme sound, which every duck caller is different, everybody has different experiences, which is totally fine. But with that range of sound, it kind of keeps in here. And I like to use it as a metaphor with a child. So like a toddler that's kind of hard to deal with and is new, and you don't understand how to necessarily discipline it. If you keep it, when you're out of the room, you keep it in a playpen, it can keep in a place that's safe, and then it can safely play. Whereas if he gets out of the playpen, he starts messing with pots and pans, you got a problem. And that's kind of like the metaphor I like to use. With a double reed, I think at times it could be a little bit easier for beginning callers because you get to stay in that playpen. You can get out here if you're really trying, but if you're really working at trying to call, it keeps you in more of a safer place. But also, if you want a single reed, it's a little bit easier to call, but you get a little more range. With that being said, how that affects your quack, your feeder, and your hail is the fact that you got the difference in reeds. So the quack sometimes get a little bit growly, a little bit more growly quack, which can be nice as in small territories where you don't need a whole lot of sound. But also, if you do it right, you can get a double reed that has a really nice quack too. Like this Zinc PH2 has a nice quack. So, I mean, that's one thing to think about. Now, I will say a single reed compared to double reed does affect the feeder call. Why? It's because you only have to make one reed go, whereas a double reed, you have two reeds to make vibrate. So, you could, oh, dropped it. You can really make a single reed go really fast on those feeder calls because you only have that one reed to vibrate. Whereas a double reed, you can still make it sound good, and if you practice enough, you won't have any problems. But to get started on a feeder call, it makes it a little bit easier. Like that Zinc PH2, it took me a lot of practice to get it in the last couple of years, but as I got it down with muscle memory, it made it a lot easier. So, last one is a hail. That's the kind of thing that I would say that is hardest between the single reed and the double reed is if you don't know necessarily, if you're not very well experienced, the single reed is definitely a lot harder to keep from going outside that extreme in the range because you can get way too plasticky and it sounds really squealy and really bad and that flares your ducks. Whereas a double reed kind of keeps you in that range a lot easier. And I would say that's probably the biggest effect of a double reed versus a single reed, but also it kind of varies within calls. Now, lastly, if someone asks me, you know, I'm a young caller, don't really know what I'm doing, what should I go with, a single reed or double reed? I would say probably, I would really tell them both, but if you had to have one, I would say double reed because it tends to keep you in that range. I think that's really good for young callers and not to get frustrated. You know, start out with the basics and work the fundamentals, and it kind of keeps you in that playpen. So, lastly, guys, I hope you really liked this video. I want you guys to hit subscribe, hit like, and comment, or if you want to message me and ask me any questions, I'd be more happy to answer. Thanks for checking us out, and have a good day, guys.